Hi everybody and welcome to a short introduction video to the game of Deathball. And this is basically my variant of the game based on the original rules from Onepagerules. The complete rules can be found in the description, but in this video I will go through some of the basics and key mechanics of the game. And it's a relatively simple, fast and fun fantasy football game. The main differences of this 2023 edition of the game and the original is that this version is based on square movement instead of inches, different rules of how to score, the ball will bounce differently, and then something about team creation. But all the basics of movement, attack, and shooting the ball will be exactly the same. So what do you need to play Deathball? First of all, you need a pitch. And in this version of the game, this is the pitch size. It's the same size as Blood Bowl 7's, so if you own a Blood Bowl 7's pitch, you can use that. I made this pitch myself. It's made out of foam, and then I cut the squares 1 by 1 inch into the foam, painted it up, very quick and easy. And then it looks like this. So what else do you need? Well, first, a few dice. 3 should be sufficient. Then you also need an 8-sided die for the ball bouncing rules, something to use as the ball, an inch ruler, like this one for example, and then you need something to count the turns. I use this turn counter, but you can use dice or a piece of paper and write down the turns. And then, of course, you need players. So here we have a few players on the pitch. Use, again, whatever you have. It's a nice way to get some of the old minis on the pitch and use them for something. It doesn't have to be original Blood Bowl miniatures. Just use whatever you have. The players can be different types. Over here we have a brawler, but we also have linemen, shooters, and dodgers, like for example this Ratman. All player types have 2 basic abilities: skill, used to take the ball and shoot the ball and tackle, and brawl, used to attack. All the squares surrounding a player are the control zone squares. And if you want to attack or tackle the player, you have to move into the control zone like here. And if a player leaves a control zone, there will be a free attack option for the model here. We do not only have different types of players, also different types of teams. Basically, there are skill teams, fast teams like elves and ratmen. Then we have brawl teams like undead and havoc, dwarves, orcs, and then we have hybrid teams, humans, for example, and demons like we just saw here. Pick whatever you like. Every player has a chance to activate, and you can choose to roll 1, 2, or 3 dice, and you need a 4+ to make a successful activation. If you roll less than 4, you will fail, and 2 failed activations and their turn will move over to the opposing team. So the more dice you roll, the greater risk, and of course also a greater reward. So let's say this Havoc shooter will try to activate twice. He will roll 2 dice. One of them is good, the other is a failure, so he can make 1 action. Now let's try the brawler back here. He also decides to use 2 dice, but let's say he failed them both, and the turn would now be the orc team. And 1 orc would activate and fail again, and every time the turn shifts to the other team, you move the turn counter. And a game will last 40 turns. After that, the game is over. Sometimes the turns will be very, very quickly, and sometimes all the models can and will activate before the turn moves back to the other team. When a player activates, it can move, and the basic movement is 4 squares. Then the player can make an attack action by moving into the control zone of another player, and then they will compare their brawl values and roll to see the attack. If both have equal brawl value, a 4 is needed, but if the attacker is stronger, he needs a roll of 3 or maybe just 2. So when a model is attacked, you roll on the attack hit chart and see what happens. Sometimes a model is pushed, stunned, knocked out of the game, and maybe even injured. Third thing you can do is to tackle. Again, you will move into the control zone, but this time you'll just try to tackle the ball out of the hands of the target. And in this case, it's the skill value and not brawl value you compare. And again, if you have a higher value, you will need to roll less to be successful. In this case, with a 5, the player here just took the ball out of the hands of the target model. Fourth thing you can do is to shoot. So you measure the distance, you can have negative modifier if it's a longer distance, and then you add your skill value and you need a 6 to be successful. A roll of 3, for example, will just be a failed shot, and a roll of 1, and the shooter will drop the ball where he stands. And if you drop the ball will bounce, and you will use the 8-sided die to decide the direction, and you will roll a d3 to see how many squares the ball will bounce. Let's count 1, 2, 3, 4 in clockwise direction here, and then the ball will be positioned right between the shooter and the target. Fifth and final action you can do is to recover. So let's make an activation roll. It's a roll of 6, so it's good, and the player here will get back up from a stunned condition. If you need to pick up the ball or receive the ball, it's not a separate action, but something you can do as part of your movement. So let's roll 2 activation dice. 1 is good. So this player will move into the square with the ball, and again, he will use his skill value to pick up the ball. On a roll of 3 here, he's successful, and then he can continue his movement. But of course, it's all about scoring some goals and points. So one way you can score a point is to roll for activation and move into the opponent's end zone. Let's say this player made 2 good activations. He will be able to move twice. You can easily do the same action more than once if you roll the activation dice for it, and then 1 point is scored. The other way to score is to completely wipe out the opponent. In this case, knock out or injure all the players from the other team. In this case, you will also score 1 point. In a game of Deathball, there will be 5 players on the pitch. In this case, a Havoc team with a shooter, a brawler, and 3 linemen. Before the first round, all players must be set up in the team home zone, and the ball will be at the center of the pitch. But let's remove 3 of these models and have a short match with only 2 players on each team. Let's begin with a roll-off. The orcs will use the green dice here, and they will begin. Round number 1. So first, this orc brawler will try to activate, and he will have 2 successful activations. He will choose to move for his first activation, and then he will move again. Remember, you can do the same action more than once. And then the lineman here will try to activate 3 times, but he will only make 1 of them. He will move into the center of the pitch and try to pick up the ball. A roll of 3 is needed, and he was just fine. So he picks up the ball and he can continue his movement. Now it's the Havoc team, and the brawler here will try to activate. And he is good. 2 actions. His first will be an attack. They have equal brawl value, so he will need a 4. So he will be successful in his second attempt. And what happens? It's a roll of 8. Orc will be stunned. Now it's the Havoc shooter's turn. He has a high skill value but a very low brawl value. He will take the chance with 3 activation dice but only make 1 of them. So the turn will go to the orcs now, and the brawler is stunned. He will try to get back up. One action is good, so he will get back on his feet. He can't do anything else. Now the orc lineman. 3 attempts, only 1 is good, so he will try to leave the control zone of the Havoc Shooter, and that gives him a free attack, but his brawl value is too low, so he does not hit the orc. Instead, the orc will continue its movement with the ball. He has a clear path to the end zone. The Havoc Shooter will stop him. He rolls 3 dice and fails 2 of them, so now the turn will go back to the orcs, but he can make his 1 good activation first before the orcs get the turn back. And now the brawler here will make 2 good rolls. He will begin with an attack, and he will fail the first. He will have a successful attack in his second attempt, and with a roll of 3, the Havoc Roller is only pushed back. He's not hit or stunned or knocked out. So we'll jump to another part of this example game. Now the Havoc team are in control of the ball. The shooter has the ball close to the orcs' end zone, and now the orcs have their turn. The brawler here will have to do something, and he will make 3 good activation rolls this time. So he'll take 1 move action and then a second move action, and that will bring him into the control zone of the Havoc Shooter. And he is significantly stronger. With a roll of 2, he will actually be successful because he has a brawl value 2 higher than the Havoc Shooter. And with a roll of 8 on the attack hit chart, he will be stunned. And when a model is attacked successfully, if it has the ball, it will drop it, no matter if it's pushed or stunned or injured or whatever. The other orc is stunned, but he will jump up and then he will move towards the center of the pitch. Great defense by the orcs. Now another example. The Havoc Shooter activates, and he is very successful. So he can begin his move action. He will move into a square with the ball, and with a roll of 6, he will easily pick it up and continue his movement. So he will move slightly away from the orc, and then he will try to shoot the ball to his teammate. So we'll measure the distance here. It's about between 6 and 7 inches. For every 4 inches, you will have a -1 modifier, but also -1 because the orc's control zone is in between the shooter and the target. That will be 2 minus, but he has a skill of 3, so he will need a 5, and he rolls a natural 6. That is a successful shot. So he will hit the target, and the brawler can attempt to receive the ball, but he fails. The shot was good, the reception was bad. Now the ball will bounce. We will count 5 hits directly down and 2 squares. He still has 1 action left, so the Havoc Shooter moves closer to the ball. In this final example, the orcs have the ball, but the Havoc Shooter has the activation. He will activate twice and move into the orc's control zone, and here he will try to make a tackle. He has a higher skill value, so he'll need a roll of 3. And with a 6, he's all good, and he will tackle the ball out of the hands of the orc. And from here on, he could have continued his actions if he had any. A complete match will take somewhere between 20 and maybe 30 minutes. And sometimes it's very fast. If you miss your activations here every time you move the turn counter, let's say it's the orc's turn, and they will fail again, and the turn will go back to the Havoc team. Sometimes it's very fast. In the rules, there are also some advanced rules that you can use if you like. They are not necessary, but they can spice the game up even more. There are rules for team creation, how to manage your teams with game points, and how all the players can evolve with experience points they earn by scoring goals, making injuries, or becoming player of the game, for example. Here we have 2 teams on the pitch, a Havoc team on the right and an Undead team on the left. They have chosen their lineup and their traits, and they are ready. They can't wait to get started with the first season of the Deathball 2023 League. And very shortly, I'm going to post the first match video. And if you like the content, please subscribe, make a comment if you like. And then thanks for watching this video. I hope you'll join me for future matches and bad reps.